Right. Hmm. Good morning, everybody. Happy Sabbath.
Happy
I'm
Sabbath morning.
Good morning. Hi. I'm glad to be with you this morning. Let me introduce myself shortly. I'm Arjan. I'm from the Netherlands. I think some of you I've met before, some not. Um, I'm glad to be with you here to this morning. Um, I think we're going to have two sessions. This first one and another one at at 6 my time, but in 2 hours. And I intend to do a first, like a short, but a presentation. I think it will be a review of what I've done earlier, and then the second hour, like a Q&A session where we can have like a discussion. Um, of course, during my presentation, you can ask questions as well, more like clarifying questions, perhaps. If there's really like questions that need time, I will postpone them to the Q&A session. But if you don't know, if you're not sure, just ask. That's fine. Um, as Yeah, as you know, as a movement, we are now in a process of going through certain materials, certain studies to settle into the Sunday law message. I happen to be one of them that present as well. It's not that I necessarily have a Sunday law message literally, but my study has some implications and is indirectly related to the Sunday law. Um, as you know, Elder Terry has a presentation already since I think almost about a year since April, May last year. She started to teach on the Sunday law. Um, I, I would call it like the Western Front. So she has been teaching the Western Front story in regard to the Sunday law. So Western Front, I mean the things happening internally in the United States, the battle that is going on within the United States itself. My study that I introduced in January this year is dealing with the same history basically, but it's addressing the Eastern Front. So the Eastern Front is um, the battles, prophetic battles between the fight between the King of the North and the King of the South. So that is USA, Russia conflict. So that's the Eastern Front, and these are two different stories. And that's why I'm saying I don't have a Sunday law message because Sunday law is like the event Sunday law is something internal to the United States. It's an internal event that we call it National Sunday Law, of course. Now, it's something that starts internally within the United States. And the study that I presented in January in the at the German camp meeting um, is dealing with the Eastern Front. So that's why I'm saying I don't have literally like a Sunday law message, but it has implications because the Eastern Front and the Western Front, they need to be in sync with each other or in line with each other in regard to the waymarks need to be talking about the same time period because that's I think what we have done through the years in this movement. And um, I think that needs to be in sync, and that has also been my premise from the beginning that um, well, yeah, that they need to be in sync. The problem was that when I started to the study that I present, and I'm going to assume in my studies today that you have watched those presentations that I did at the German camp meeting. It was a three-part series, and there was a Q&A at the end also, but like primarily the first three, the three-part series is where I basically presented my case. Um, and the challenge with that study is that it was not it's not in line with the waymarks that Elder Terry has set up for her study. And so therefore my study suddenly became a Sunday law message as well. What I wanted to say as well is that the message that the study that I put together was not a study that I put together in January or in December. It has been developing since after Penium, so since 2022, especially the things that I presented as Concord. We will go through the line in a second. If you remember, you may have forgotten a little bit of the details, but I say 2022 is Concord. The things that the things that are in my study today, I put together in 2022, at the end of 2022. And the things that I put together as Exeter. So my study, my premise was that 2024 is actually Exeter. I put that together at the end of 2024. So things have been developing in the last, what is it, three years. And that kind of climaxed in a study in January this year on the German camp meeting, where I guess I needed to put it out and thought like, okay, well, I could be wrong, but this is what I found out in the last 3 years, and that's why I presented it. I was asked to present it, and that's what I did, and that's why we're here now. I'm repeating all the time. I'm visiting the different ministries in these last few weeks, and I basically try to present the same thing for each group, because not every group or not all the members within the group are able to watch the other presentations. So if I go to the German group, there's Germans that don't understand English. So they cannot go to the Spanish channel and watch my presentation that I did for the Spanish channel, for example. So they are really depending on that particular study that you present for the German group. So I try to be consistent in my presentations for each group. I know other speakers didn't, and that's fine, because I guess the message developed and they decided to teach something different for each group. I guess it's difficult for the people that are having language barriers to keep up with it. So that's why I try to teach the same thing, more or less. So what I've been doing is the first hour I review the presentations that I did at the German camp meeting into one presentation, a short review, and then the second hour I do a Q&A, more kind of like a discussion. I may enter in some new thoughts or new ideas, because the message has been developing the last 2 months as well. So that's my short introduction, which got a little long. Let's go to the. So far so good. Are there any questions before we start?
No, but I really appreciated how well you gave us the overview of where we are and how you've presented. So thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, good to hear. Nice. So the study that I presented at the German camp meeting is focusing on the line from Penium to Sunday law, or what we call national Sunday law. So that dispensation, Penium to Sunday law. But before I go to that line, I want to go shortly to a bigger picture that starts in 1989 to understand the dilemma of 2021. I'll explain that in a second. So I want to go to 1989. So 1989 to 1991, we marked a point where the King of the South comes to its end. We see a deadly wound and a death. We see in this time period the USA and the USSR having this conflict. We call it the Cold War. There's this conflict between the two. And at the end, it's the USSR that comes to its end. And that leaves a vacuum, or I guess it's not a vacuum, but the place is not filled with some other power. Now it's the United States that has sole rulership, so to speak. So in this time period, we see that the United States rises into power as in a unilateral power. Um, they talk about a new world order where the United States is now the sole ruler, it's the police of the world, and they use that power. They start using that power, they start misusing that power, and you see a change in the world order, so to speak. Elder Perminder has introduced the thought that or the idea that this is also marking the rise of the seventh kingdom. And I think since 1989 we can actually mark the beginning of the seventh kingdom. And I think this element of this on the Eastern Front, I think this element of the rise in unilateral power, the relation that the USA has with the rest of the world I think, is born here with the death of the King of the South. You see, this is starting here in 1989 to become this unilateral power. The problem is it is changing somewhat after 9/11. I think 9/11 is a point where the world recognizes and sees that the USA is vulnerable. It is vulnerable because of the attack. You can see that because of the attacks. You could even argue the USA is weak in some way. I write it down weak, but perhaps I mean vulnerable. But it shows that the USA isn't as strong perhaps as it wants to be. It's vulnerable. It is attacked. And after this attack, they even want more. They want to use their unilateral power even more. So in 2003, we mark we have the Iraq invasion. So we all know that it didn't really happen as it should have happened. It was based on false information. The intelligence services collected intelligences. If it was willfully or not, I'm not 100% sure. But they decided to use that information to try and convince the world that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. They went into Iraq, they searched for those weapons, and they found out that they weren't there. And the rest of the world realized that the USA basically duped them into this war. They tricked them into this war with fake news, basically. So this marks the beginning of a fake news era, you could argue. So USA here in this time period starts to become or loses a lot of credibility. And this damages really the position of the USA in the world in relation to the rest of the world. So in this time period, also when Barack Obama is president, is not able, but for example, Barack Obama doesn't dare to intervene when, for example, Russia invades Crimea in 2014. Or there's other issues in the world where the United States normally would probably have something to say about it or would intervene, but they stayed out of it, or they would have an opinion but not really intervene militarily or something. And I think that lasted for almost 2 decades. This hesitation from the United States, but also that the rest of the world wasn't so sure about the United States and its credibility. That needed to be restored, and that took some time. So because of this, I'm not calling it a downfall, but this loss of credibility. So I'll write down credibility here. So you see the credibility going down. At the same time, and I guess there is a connection to it, to both of them, is we see a rise of the King of the South. We see a rise in winning spheres of influence. So the US of Russia starts to become a significant player on the world scene. It has spheres of influence, not as before here, not as before, where it was really the satellite states that bordered Russia, so to speak, but now it's a worldwide empire. Now it is Cuba, it's Venezuela, it's nations in Africa, it's Syria, it's China, you could argue. It's these spheres of influence that um, that develop and grow, and they become stronger, and they become more of them, and that comes to a high point in, I think we call that 2019. So 2019, that's Raffia. Raffia is the point where Russia is at its strongest. It has a significant amount of influence in the world. It competes with the United States in certain uh, territories, in certain nations. And another part where Russia is winning is in the information warfare. It's in winning the narrative. So since this time period, Vladimir Putin is president, of course, for many years, and he is trying to send a message to the world that the USA, that Russia is actually a trustworthy partner. It is a stable democracy. You can trust them. You can do business with them. Um, we're not so we're not so problematic as we were in the past. We're not a troublemaker. That's basically, in my words, the story that Vladimir Putin tried to sell to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world bought into it to such a degree that in this time period here, states within NATO were openly discussing or question why NATO actually, what was the purpose of NATO? That because Russia wasn't really the enemy anymore, and NATO was really divided on uh, on what their position was in regards to Russia, what their position was in regards to um, safety within Europe and safety within the world. NATO was divided, so NATO is here an example, but you can see that the the story that Putin tried to tell to European nations primarily, but also the rest of the world, um, people bought into it to such a
Arjan?
degree that, yeah,
Um, Sorry to interrupt, but that comment about um, um, so the King of the South is winning the information war and is becoming stronger. I was wondering if you found in your research was part of the narrative um, pointing out how deceptive the United States was and its loss of credibility for the false information that they did since 2003.
so I'm not 100% sure if I understand your question. So your question is there evidence where
Did you
the
see
nation,
any part of their narrative of their information war to say, look, we're trustworthy, we're, you can work with us, we're not like we were in the past, but did they ever say, and but by the way, look what the United States did. It lied to the world, it defied the United Nations, doing a compare and contrast, basically. Did
yes,
you
yes,
see that?
yes, I think that
Okay.
is what that I think Iraq is one of the sparks for Putin, so to speak. It's like, hey, if America can do this,
Yes.
I
Okay.
can do I can do the same thing.
Yeah.
America isn't so nice as everybody thinks, and
Hmm.
so it was for Vladimir Putin, I think, a spark that made it possible for him, for them
So it's
to rise in power.
so essentially the king in the north shot himself in the foot by doing the lies, but it
Yeah.
enabled the king of the south to come into power, which at some point doesn't that slow down the unipolar government
Yes.
because
So
he's dueling with the king of the north to be two powers, not one.
yeah. So the king of the south is basically a restraint here to the king of the north.
Yes.
Um, yes.
Okay. It's
Yes.
interesting how that worked out, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
lies actually were good because
Yeah.
it slowed down the
Yeah.
King of the North's
Yeah.
progress.
Good point. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that's an excellent point because I was also thinking that the fact that you brought that out, Kathy, gave more credibility to Putin because Putin was trying to say, like you said, Aryan, you can trust us, right? So by pulling the cover down of the King of the North and revealing that, gave more credibility to the trustworthiness, let's say, that the King of the South was trying to promote about themselves, the narrative they were trying to promote about themselves. And one more quick thing, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I saw something from your demonstration already that I had never put together really before. And it's the way that you show that the posturing after 9/11, kind of like a strong man would posture himself in a wrestling match up against another strong man. When the United States saw itself as weak, then it had to put in more of that masculine type of patriarchal, strongman power, so to speak, right? And it's like two bullies up against each other, the King of the South and the King of the North. You can even think of two children in a playground where one begins to tell, well, I'm stronger than you. They do it in narrative first, right? But then they end up actually pushing and shoving. And you can really see that um, posturing, which is so important to the message of the toxic masculinity and all of that. So thank you, Arian. I really never saw that before.
Good for pointing that out. That was good. Yeah. Um, so I tell this story because we come to a point in 2021, and this marks the beginning of the dispensation that we're going to look at. But I want to understand 2021. I want you to understand where. Oh, I get something. Sorry. Um, I want you to understand the dilemma that Joe Biden was in October 2021, because the problem is that the United States lost credibility here in this time period, and it never got restored here. And secondly, Russia had won the narrative for many years. It won the information wars and battles in these years with the United States several times, and the world loved Putin basically. And now in 2021, Joe Biden receives information, serious intelligences, where it says Putin is going to invade Ukraine, and it's going to be a serious invasion. It wants to topple the Ukrainian government. It wants to go into Kiev, topple the government, and it wants to take a big chunk of Ukraine and bring it into the Russian empire, so to speak, in the Russian nation. So that in the end, Ukraine would be this small, insignificant country with a pro-Russian government. That was the mindset of Putin, and Joe Biden knew that there in October. And he realized that he realized the problem. He knew he needed to do something about it, but he knew he was not in a position to, with credibility. The rest of the world loved Putin, but he knew he needed to do something. So he could have done the same thing as the previous presidents did, do nothing, like Obama, or like Trump, even before him, that left Syria and like, hey, I'll give it to Putin. But Biden decided, no, we need to do something about this. So 2021, I think, is the turning point, or the point where the United States changes their position. It's like, no, we take control of the situation. We are the leader. And I would say 2021 marks the position where the USA starts to operate in this unilateral mindset against like, no, this is a problem and we need to take control of that problem. And that happens here in 2021. So I'm, I'm not 100% sure how to phrase it, but you could say like he takes the crown or the throne on back. This is really I think this decision, this point, this is changing the places with the King of the South, so to speak, taking control of the situation. So I think where we see the rise of the Seventh Kingdom being marked. So we see it rise here, then there is some trouble here. The King of the South restrains the Seventh Kingdom, so to speak. And I would say here we see it rise again. And it's the October moment where Joe Biden takes control of the situation. That is and this is also an Exeter. So I'm going to mark that here as well. This is also an Exeter for the Sunday Law Waymark. So an Exeter, I'm suggesting that an Exeter is always the point where you actually see the issue play out before you. So you see it, you see actually what is happening, what is going to happen here. But you know what is going to happen here because you already see it here. You see it here very little. Maybe the rest of the world doesn't even recognize it because it's a decision made in the White House, and this needs to develop into a message, so to speak, by Joe Biden, by America, etc. But you can see there, especially with hindsight and the information we have, that the decision there was, USA taking back this control, the development of the Seventh Kingdom, which gives us an idea what the Sunday law is going to look like. So on the Eastern Front, the Sunday law is where it's also where the United States takes control of the rest of the world. Of course, we have a national Sunday law and a worldwide Sunday law. Also, that is a development, but you can see the beginning of it here at 2020. So I wanted to give that background information of 2021 to understand 2021 and the significance of that waymark and the events taking place in October, because I think that is what is important to understand. So I'll go to the dispensation from 2021. So this is 2021, starting in February and ending in October. I always do October with a K somehow. That's Dutch, but that's not English. October. So Elder Tess did this basically already in her presentations back in the day. She explained a lot about 2021. Oh, camera is blurred. Yes. So February marks the beginning where the King of the North starts to irritate the King of the South, so to speak. And we know Joe Biden, the Biden administration just started here in January. Zelensky has a call. It says like, congratulations with your election. We want to do business with you. Please help us with the struggles we have. So Zelensky asked Biden, Putin invaded Crimea. We have problems at the eastern border. Can you please help us with finances, with military aid, etc.? And Joe Biden says, yes, of course, fine, but you need to do something in your country. You need to do something about your oligarchs and the corruption that is taking place, especially the Russian corruption, because the corruption is mainly done by pro-Russian oligarchs. So Zelensky goes to work, goes back and says, okay, that's what we're going to do. So they take one of the primary oligarchs in Ukraine. It's a politician. I've forgot his name, sorry, but it doesn't matter. It's a politician, has is owner of 3 television stations, which are all pro-Russian. So those television stations, they 24/7 send out Russian propaganda to the Ukrainian people. They shut down those television stations. He's political leader of a pro-Russian political party, and they freeze his assets. He is put into no, not in jail, but he is brought into court. I think he is also arrested.
I think
So
that's
that is
Victor Medvedchuk. Victor
Medvedchuk, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And so that all started in February. This is where the King of the North starts to say, like, do something about this problem in your country. And Putin doesn't. Oh yeah, and this Viktor Medvedchuk, it's a very close personal friend with Putin. So Putin is not happy when that information comes to him. And in March of the same year, there's a military buildup at the Ukrainian border. So that is through satellite images. They can trace that thousands of Russian soldiers and military equipment is installed across the Ukrainian border. And there is a direct connection with the event in February and this arrest of Medvedchuk. So this all started with the King of the North, and we know that the King of the North. So we call this Panium, but in another story we call this Beneventum, right? Or we can also call it Boston. So Beneventum in the story of Pyrrhus is a war that was instigated by the King of the North, and it was also won by the King of the North. And it was the first one that was won by the King of the North, because the previous 2, Heraclea and Esculum, were all won by the King of the South. It were Pyrrhic victories. That means Pyrrhus won, but with great loss. But this one, Pyrrhus lost. And that's why 2021 is significant, because it was a game changer. So the King of the North instigates it, and the King of the North also wins it here. And that is taking place here in October. I shared all the details in my previous presentations. And I don't want to go into all the details, but October was the point where Biden had this dilemma and made the decision to actually do something and not ignore the situation and take control and fight against the King of the South, so to speak. And started to change the narrative, started to influence the information that Putin tried to send out, because Putin said, like, oh no, this is all military buildup. It's just training. It's just military training. No worries. We're still a trustworthy partner. You can trust us. You can do business with us. No worries at all. And Biden came to a point where he said, like, no way, you cannot trust this guy. He has set his mind upon Ukraine, on the Kiev, on the capital, etc. And step by step, the USA started to share that with their allies. And their allies were like, no way, we don't believe that. We believe perhaps that Ukraine, or that Putin would do some little thing somewhere in eastern Ukraine, a little small invasion, but not so big, not so super significant. Until the invasion, most European leaders didn't believe in an invasion, or at least not in a significant big invasion. And it took the invasion for them to wake up to that reality and realize that Joe Biden was actually right. So that's what I actually mark at the next waymark, because in this story of Beneventum, the story of Pyrrhus, it's in this year where Pyrrhus loses the war against Rome, and that somehow Egypt hears about this victory of Rome against Pyrrhus, and Egypt knew Pyrrhus, it was a great warrior, and he lost the battle. And then they realized, like, oh, Rome is a significant entity. It's a state we need to consider. We want to have how do you say that? Diplomatic. We want to have diplomatic relations with that entity. So they sent ambassadors to Rome to set an agreement, so to speak, to have diplomatic relations in 273. So the event. So this is what Elder Tess has marked. This waymark is what Elder Tess has marked as with the symbol 273. You probably remember X27, the study where she sees 273 Levites on the ship. It brought her to this story, brought her to this waymark, the 273, and she saw that it was a battle, but she saw Panium and the Sunday law in between. So she saw 273 in the harvest of the Levites. That was basically the whole beginning of Elder Tess's journey. It started with X27, then the 273, and then the whole Pyrrhus studies. So 273 is an important symbol, and she marked it at this waymark here. And Egypt sending ambassadors to Rome. So this is Concord. 273, we see Egypt sending ambassadors to Rome. Egypt sending ambassadors to Rome was because of the events that took place at this waymark. So the events at this waymark caused Egypt to send ambassadors to Rome. There's a connection between the two waymarks and the events. So I placed this waymark in 2022. And on the Eastern Front, on this line, I started in February and I ended in September. So in February, we all know February 24th marks the invasion where Russia invades Ukraine. And that was the wake-up call for the rest of the world to realize, oh, well, Biden was actually right, or Putin is actually not the trustworthy partner we believed he was. So, but it all started with, there's 3 or 4 events that I would like to mark. It's the 21st of February. The 21st of February was the day where Russia or Putin declared the eastern provinces of Ukraine as independent states. So it's a declaration of independence, a declaration of independence of this Donbas region. I think it's 2 or 3 provinces in the east. And Putin says those provinces, they're actually independent states now. He declared them he declared them independent on the 21st of February. On the 24th, he invades them. So he invades those provinces, and he also invades through the north to Kiev. Well, we know that all failed. It was all a failure. They were not able to take Kiev, and they were not able to take those eastern provinces completely. But before I go there, I want to mark the 25th. So the 25th of February is the point where the world stands up, so to speak. So it's the day after the invasion. Now the world stands up and says, like, this is illegal, this is wrong, this should not happen. So first of all, NATO comes together. NATO, as divided as it was, suddenly is united against Russia, and their eyes are opened. It's like, hey, we have a war on the European continent. We need to do something here. And all the European nations, or all the nations within NATO, were united to fight against Russia, so to speak. So you see a Concord here at this waymark. The second place where you see that as well is at the United Nations. So you see the United Nations Security Council, for example. The council comes together to vote for a resolution. So there is a resolution. And this resolution says that the invasion of Russia into Ukraine is illegal, should immediately stop, and basically that. You should know that the Security Council consists out of 15 states. It's a separate council, so you have the General Assembly of the United Nations. This is the assembly where all the nations of the world are united. And then you have the Security Council, which is a council that comes together when there is world security issues in the world that are significant enough. And the Security Council comes together and talk about it, and there's this resolution, they vote for it. They say like, hey, we need to help this entity, we need to help this state, or this violence need to be condemned, etc. So on the 25th, they came together and they said, this violence in Ukraine is not acceptable and it should immediately stop. So that's 15 states. This is Security Council's 15 states. 5 of those states are permanent members. That means that is the United States, Russia, China, the UK, and France are the 5 permanent members. The other 10 members are rotating every first or second year. So every second year there's different members within the Security Council. And so when there is this vote, those 5 permanent members also have veto power. That means if one of those 5 nations does not accept the resolution is not accepted at all. It is not passed. There's this, so you have the United Nations Charter, which is basically the Constitution of the United Nations. It's where all the rules and regulations is how the United Nations operates and how the Security Council operates and how the General Assembly operates, etc. So Article 27 of this charter, 27 deals about the voting, how the voting is organized within the Security Council. So Article 27 talks about the Security Council and how the voting operates when the Security Council come together, that the permanent members have a veto power, but also, for example, that when a certain nation is part of a conflict, they're not allowed to vote. So in this case, Russia is part of this conflict. So Russia is actually the problem here. So according to the rules, according to Article 27, Russia is not allowed to take part in the vote because they are part of the problem, and the rest of the Security Council should vote on the issue. But Russia breaks the rule, not for the first time. It's a rule that has been broken many times in the past, so they just do it again. It's a rule that has been broken not only by Russia in the past, but also by America. So it's not the first time, but it's significant enough. It's very irritating also, or how do you say that? You would say in the other nations, in the United Nations, I think it's very problematic what happened here. Russia vetoes actually this resolution. So Russia is the problem in the issue. Russia vetoes this resolution. So the resolution is not accepted. So that is Article 27.3. So we have a 273 symbol here at this waymark, which I thought was neat, is that Russia vetoes the resolution, but therefore it breaks Article 27.3. And there was something, but I forgot, sorry. It will come back. I forgot. Blank mind. Okay, so I'll just move on. We'll come back. So I'll move on to the next. At the end, I'm going to bookend this this waymark, February to September. So September, we are at the point in this war now where Putin realizes that he's losing. he had two goals: taking Kiev and topple the government and make it a pro-Russian government, and take a big chunk of the eastern part of Russia, especially those provinces, take them and annex them into Russia. Neither of those goals were met. Kiev, they already gave up in April or early April, and here in August of this same year, the Ukrainians started counteroffensive. So since February, the Russians have taken a significant amount of territory, but now in August, the Ukrainians started counteroffensive, and quite a serious one, where they actually gain a significant amount of territory back. And now Putin is going to be worried because he already failed the first goal, and now he sees that territory is even taken back with great speed. So in September, he realized, like, I need to do something. And he organizes a big party in Moscow, gets all his friends together, and he shares the story within his own country and to the rest of the world that we are going to annex on this day, on September the 30th, we are annexing. So it's the annexation of the Donbass. So that's those three provinces: Luhansk. Forgive me, I forgot the names, but it's those eastern provinces that he annexes, or at least he claims to annex. The problem is that he doesn't even have them. He's still fighting over that territory, and at this point, Ukraine is even gaining and winning territory back. So those provinces are even in Russian hands, so to speak. But he claims them, and he tries to win the narrative, share the information that he is the winner in this battle, while he's actually not. And it's at this point where he does that, because he actually realizes he's losing the game. The same day, we see that the Security Council comes together again on the 30th of September. The Security Council comes together. There's this resolution again, and this resolution says that this annexation is illegal, and the referenda that took place in those provinces, because Putin claimed that it was all legal because they had some referendum, and they asked the people, would you like to be part of Russia? Of course, with the gun on your head, so to speak, they were asked, do you want to be part of Russia? So it was not a free election, so to speak. It was not a free referendum at all. So that's why the United Nations Security Council came together, and they said that referendum was illegal. It was not a free referendum, and the annexation is illegal too. So, and Russia again vetoes this resolution. So the resolution is not accepted. Oh yeah, now I remember what I wanted to say here, because although Russia vetoes the resolution both here and here, it was especially here where the world, or I should say the other members of the Security Council, came together. They stood up, they stood in front of a camera, and they felt it was necessary to do something, to say something. And I don't think that happens often at the Security Council. But they were so frustrated about Russia vetoing this resolution while they actually were not allowed, that they came together. The rest of the Security Council came together. They stood in front of a camera, and they basically said, no matter what Russia does, it is illegal what they're doing. It's illegal what they're doing in Ukraine, and they should not veto. They don't have the power to veto this resolution, but they did it anyway. So it was America standing there in front of a camera with all their allies around them, and they stood with America, and they protested again what was happening here in Ukraine, and what happened here in the Security Council. So, and they stood together with America. They supported America in their effort, in their fight against the King of the South. Here, America was alone. The King of the North is now here, stands alone. Joe Biden shouting to the rest of the world, don't trust Putin, don't trust him. He's going to invade. He is going to invade. It's going to be serious. And the rest of the world was like, well, we're not so sure. Now the rest of the world, or the Western world, so to speak, was very sure, and they actually gave credits to the United States government, to Joe Biden. It's like, if you were right. I'm suggesting that element of that story is where Egypt sends its ambassadors to Rome. So it is Egypt, the world, or the allies giving credits to the king of the north. It's like, all right, you were right. Actually, what you did here is we want to give credits. We want you to give credits for it. But they were only able to do that here. And they only saw it here. So that is my version of Egypt sending ambassadors to Rome, where the world comes basically in concord with the USA in their position, in their fight against Russia. So we have this waymark has quite some characteristics. We have, of course, it's Concord. This waymark is always called Concord. There's Egypt sending ambassadors to Rome. We have the number 273. It is also an increase of knowledge, and an increase of knowledge is at the increase of knowledge, we always say is the waymark where all information is available. All the information is available to understand the end. We may not understand it yet, but all the information is there at that point. Now with hindsight, we understand it better, but at that point, perhaps it wasn't so clear, but all the information was there. We say that, for example, it's this example that we use for William Miller. Like in 1798, you couldn't see it. There was nothing really significant. It was invisible. It's invisible. Then in 1818, all the information was there. So the information that William Miller had, he studied from 1816 to 1818. You could see it. Jesus comes back in 1843. Everything was available, but it was not formalized. It wasn't shared yet. Nobody knew it, but the information was there. And then it takes until the next waymark to formalize it, to make it clear, to make it visible that there is actually something happening. So I think that is also laid out in this waymark. I'll explain that later. But let me first go to the next waymark, if that's okay. Or perhaps it is actually the point where I should explain that. So at this point, Putin brought himself into a position where he was not able to save himself out of it. He needed help to get out of this problem. He brought himself into a problem. I think you could argue, but it's invisible, that Putin already Putin decided what he did here. He decided that already here, and Joe Biden knew it. And it was the wrong decision, because going to invade Ukraine in the end of the story is going to be the death of the King of the South. It's where it was the wrong decision. And you can see that here. Now all the information is available because Putin has a problem. He ends up in a war. He is not winning it, but they're in a stalemate here in September. Basically, the situation here compared to what the situation is today, it's not much different. Of course, the territory may go a little this way or a little that way, but basically the situation today, as compared to 2022, at the end of 2022, is basically the same. You could call it a stalemate. So Russia isn't gaining anything or not significant, maybe a little bit here, and then Ukraine is gaining a little bit in another area. But it's in this way, this war can go on for years, for decades. So Russia needs help to get out of this. Of course, Ukraine needs help, but already has help from the King of the North, and now Russia needs help too. And the only one that can help the King of the South here is the King of the North. And even that element where the king of the south actually needs to go on his knee to say, like, king of the north, can you please help me with this situation, is basically a defeat of the king of the south. Well, that is progressive, of course, and of course Russia or Putin will not even make it sound like that is the case, because even today in the news, Russia thinks it's the big winner in the whole discussion, in the whole negotiations they have with Trump. But just the fact that Trump is leading this, or the King of the North is leading these negotiations, and basically Russia is just in a position where they should just listen to what the King of the North says. Of course, there is a debate. There is, well, I have little with here. If you can give me a little bit of this, then we can come to a compromise, whatever. But in the end, the King of the North is on the throne, is in control of this situation, and if they want, you can destroy Russia, whatever. You know, it's not like if they want, they can give many more weapons to Ukraine, and Ukraine is able to destroy Russia or send it out. So it's the King of the North, it's Russia that is in control of this situation at the moment when you watch the news today, and I think that is where we should see the defeat also, where the King of the North just takes control of the King of the South, and the King of the South is just obeying the King of the North, so to speak. So
Arjan,
yeah.
would you say then basically the king of the south did a self-inflicted wound similar to what the king of the north did in 2003? It inflicted a wound. I'm not gonna call it a wound, but I mean it lost its credibility because of what it did, which took it down. But it looks like king of the south here is then, because of Ukraine, follows Pyrrhus, sure, right? It's self-inflicted.
Yes, I never saw the connection between 2003 and here, but yes, I guess that's true. It's different in a way that because it was a different subject in Iraq. It was about misinformation, etc. And here it is about an invasion. It's also about an invasion, and you could even argue, now I think about it, I didn't share that in my studies in Germany. I didn't focus on it, but the same article, or it actually was an article connected. It was a series of articles, actually. So I used one article in my German series, but it was part of a series of articles, and another article was was telling the story how the intelligence services of Russia have told a lie to Putin. So in 2021, it was the intelligence services told Putin, basically, this is going to be easy. We just walk into Kiev, we already have some secret agents there, and they already prepared it, and we have secret agents in Kiev, we have apartments that we can rent, we can just move in, and we already have agreements with certain Ukrainians that will do something for us to make it easy, etc. So they told the story to Putin, like, this is going to be easy. Yes, they told Putin what he wanted to hear, and that's part of that article. These intelligence services failed big time. So even there, you could argue, compared to the Iraq situation, that the Iraq invasion was based on false information. This is based on false information as well. So I like that. I never thought about that. So my suggestion has been that Exeter is 2024. And this is also at the same time the challenge compared to the other Sunday law messages that are around, is that I have been marking 2024, especially then I've never been really dogmatic about those names, about those months, but I've been marking July to November, to the Exeter waymark, because in 2024 we see that the King of the North starts to take control of the situation of this problem, because now it is Trump who is not in an official position yet, because he is only he's only a candidate of the Republican Party here, not an official. He's not elected. He's just a candidate of the Republican Party, not a government position. So in July, though, Trump sends one of his friends, Viktor Orban, who is a prime minister or president of Hungary, and he sends him to Putin. So Putin now, no, sorry, Orban visits Vladimir Putin in, I think it was July 5 or something. And it is the first time for a European leader, or even, a European leader to visit Vladimir Putin, the first time after the invasion. So it was a big shock for European Union, and but yeah, he just went there, but he didn't go there in name of the European Union. He basically was the puppet of Trump. Trump did not have an official position yet, so he sent Orban, and Orban went there to start talking about, are you open for negotiations? Are you open to a ceasefire? We should have a ceasefire and start talking. Putin invited him, or accepted accepted him at his office, so to speak, had a conversation, and he left. And then in the same year, in November, we see that Trump does the same thing. Now Trump is elected on November 5, and November 7, Trump has a phone call with Putin, where they basically agree that Putin now is, sorry, where they agree that in January, when Trump will be in office officially, they will deal with the situation, and they're going to start talks or negotiations, etc. So basically, Trump said, "Wait for January, and we're going to fix this." So the King of the North, visits Putin. I know it is in visits Putin. I know it is Orban, but for me that is the same thing. And here the King of the North calls, or I should say Trump. Trump calls with Putin, and they basically agree that they're going to solve this problem next year. So that is my next waymark, where they're really going to solve the problem. This is where it's really going to happen. But you can already see it here, and that is one of the characteristics of Exeter that I have been emphasizing in my studies, is that an Exeter is where you actually can see it happen. So I think that is also what Elder Parminder has been addressing at the ICM. At the ICM, Elder Parminder said, like, an Exeter is a loud cry. The loud cry is at Exeter. And why do people cry at the loud cry? Why? Because was it of something that they have seen in the past and now they understand it? Or is it something that they expect? Or is it something they read? Or is it something? Well, and I think that was my understanding. The conclusion was that at the loud cry, people cry because they see things happen now. They look around and they see things happen. And that's why they understand what is going to happen a little later, because they already see it happen now. So, And that's why I've been calling it a mini version. So the Exeter is kind of like a mini version of something a little bigger that is going to happen later. So here in this story, it is the king of the north takes control of the situation, is going to introduce the negotiation process. The king of the north is not in an official position, or Trump is not in an official position yet. Of course, we see the rise of the Seventh Kingdom, but it's not in power yet in a way. It doesn't have the power. There it has the power, and it starts to do something about it. So you can see what I call mini version of what is going to happen at the waymark. So at the next waymark. And I would argue that February of this year started that process. So in February, you can see where Trump, Putin, United States, and Russia are starting peace talks, negotiations, and they start to visit each other, having meetings in, I think it's in Saudi Arabia and things like that. So that started in February of this year. So for now, I would say that is then the beginning of that waymark.
I have a question, Arjan. So there in July 2024, when you put Orban there, you're saying that he's functioning as a puppet of Putin, right?
No, as a puppet of Trump. Sorry, maybe I said that wrong.
Why is that? Because Putin is the one that helped Orban elect president, right, of Hungary?
Well, yeah, I guess Orban is the perfect puppet because Orban is you could argue is puppet of Putin also within Europe, and has been sharing a very pro-Russian message. But here also Orban is a close friend or relative, or not relative, but a close friend of Trump. And even before, I did not mention that, but even before here, I think it is in March, where Orban and Trump, they visit each other. So this is even before Trump is the official candidate of the Republican Party. They were still in the midst of the what do you call those elections? The
primary.
Yes, the primaries. So Orban visits Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and they discuss politics, they discuss things, and the day after they met, Orban sends out a tweet where he says something. I may have it here. Give me a second. He sends something like, do I have it here? Oh, wait, it's in another document. Well, he shares something like, wait a minute. Oh, here, it must be here. March 2024. He sends a tweet and it says, "We need leaders in the world who are respected and can bring peace. He," so that's Donald Trump, "is one of them. Come back and bring us peace, Mr. President." That's what Orban tweeted the day after he met Trump at Mar-a-Lago in March. So they have this conversation. They talk about the situation in Ukraine and Russia. Trump has never made it a secret that he has a plan. He never shared much details, but he says, "We have a plan to solve this war. We're going to fix it in a day, whatever." And they had a plan. And so that's what they talk about when they meet. They talk about it. And then the day after Orban visited Trump, he sends out a tweet and says like, "Hey, Mr. President, the world needs you because we need people to bring peace." And then 2 months later, Orban visits Putin and says like, "Hey, are you ready to have peace talks? Are you ready for a ceasefire? Are you ready for negotiations?" So Orban is there not on behalf of himself, because he himself is a nobody, basically. Orban is a nobody within Europe, within the world, but only because he is this direct connection with Trump. He uses that baggage, that connection, to have a certain influence. I'm suggesting that is that he's not there on his own behalf, so to speak. He is there on behalf of the USA.
So are you saying that Orban was elected as the president of the European Union because of Trump?
No, he was not elected president of the European Union.
Or he had a high position, right?
Yeah, he was there. There is a certain council within the within the European Union. So it's not the leader of the European Union. There is a certain council, which is, these are my words, but quite insignificant council within the European Union. And every 6 months, you have this rotating presidency, or no, it's not even president. You're not the president. You are the chairperson of that council. So you're the chairperson of a certain council within the European Union, and that rotates every 6 months. So I think it was Poland that was before, or Belgium was before, and then on July it would have been Hungary. So it's not an election. He was not elected. It's a rotating schedule, so to speak. Every 6 months, there's another member of that council is the chairperson. So it happened to be that Orban was the chairperson from July onwards. So from July to December, he was the chairperson of that council. And yes, I guess he used that position, it's really an insignificant position. He used that to do that work. But he was not elected. He was not elected. It was just it happened to be that way.
And he stands for the voice of Putin there.
Yeah, yes, within Europe, he is really the pro-Russian. He shares the pro-Russian sound. He is always against sending weapons or sending money to Ukraine. He's against the support of Ukraine, etc. He's always been against that. Yes, but at the same time, he's close with Trump as well.
And I think in your previous presentation, you also said that Orban came to visit around July to Mar-a-Lago to see Trump, but he didn't visit Biden, even though he was the president.
When was that?
July 2024. Was it around the time?
July 5th.
Oh, yes, I remember. Yes, it was July here, and they visited again, and I think you had the NATO summit in Washington from July 9 to 11. You had the NATO summit in Washington. Orban was there because of the NATO meetings, and then at the last day of the NATO meetings, he left and he went to Florida to meet Trump. He never really had an official meeting with Joe Biden, but he went to visit Trump.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to ask a question. How do you align your thought with Daniel 11:41, where the King of the North enters into the glorious land? How does that align with the concept of the Sunday law that you're creating in 2025?
So you're asking me a question about the Western Front now, because and it's a good question. It's a fair question, but it's not part of this. That's actually true. That's not part of this story. So the dealings within the glorious land are a different story, and I think that's the story that Elder Terry has been sharing. And I agree, those stories need to line up with each other in regard to the waymarks and the timing of the waymarks. But here, this is the story. This is the Eastern Front. So this is the fight between the King of the North and the King of the South, and it's not talking about how the glorious land is conquered, so to speak, because that is a different story. It's an internal America story.
Oh, I just wanted to understand the concept, the way that you created Exeter there, spanning from July to where do you end?
November?
To December?
November or December. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so I wanted to understand because you're creating the concept of the Sunday law with this year. So that's what I wanted to see. Like,
Yes.
how is that Daniel 11:41 as we teach the entrance of the King of the North into the glorious land? So I just, in my mind, I was thinking, so if this is the world pertaining to Russia, Ukraine, that. So what about the waymark of the Sunday law as we are looking and framing it, entering into the glorious land, Daniel 11:41, or also Revelation 13, where he says, let us make an image to the beast. So
Yes.
that's what I wanted to understand, how they were correlating.
So what Elder Terry has been saying, Elder Terry marks 2024 as the Sunday law, and she says it has all to do with the Republican Party. So the Republican Party is this image of the beast that is set up in the United States, and it enters the glorious land, so to speak. And she says that happened on July 18. And I actually don't disagree with that. The only thing that I've been saying from the beginning, and I could be wrong, is that the things that happened in July here are definitely significant. I can see that the Republican Party is this seventh kingdom is the issue, so to speak. You can see the image set up, that this is a mini version of what we're going to see here, because now here it is, I don't know if you can say it speaks, but now it has power. Here it doesn't really have power yet. I mean, theoretically, the Democrats would have won the elections. You had a democratic government and a democratic Senate and Congress and a House. Well, then it's nice to have a authoritarian or crazy or whatever you call it Republican Party, but if they're not in power, they're basically useless. So I have been saying, like, doesn't it make more sense that the point where the Republican Party has the power, that is then the fulfillment of the Sunday law, that they enter into the glorious land. That is, and so that would be January, February, the beginning of Trump's administration.
But then if you think about the narrative that you're creating, and even with Victor Orban, as far back as March, where Orban visited Mar-a-Lago with Trump, speaking about the peace deal that they would like to see. Remember, the narrative as you created is that in March he went, in July he went, and in July he tweeted, Mr. President. So he's acknowledging the stop the steal theory, that he's saying that Trump is still the president. He's using, even though Donald Trump has not yet taken the role of president, he is still acknowledging his power. He is still acknowledging his authority as way back as March. But what I would like to know is, as it pertains to Ukraine, how then can Ukraine be the entering in of the King of the North into the glorious land? So if you're saying this is the Sunday law waymark, how is it the entrance of the King of the North into the glorious land?
The events that I put on this line is not the entrance in the glorious land. That's a different story. I'm talking about Eastern Front. This is not talking about Sunday law. So this is talking about the battle between the King of the North and the King of the South. We need to have another story, and that's the story that Elder Terry shares, that tells us about entering the glorious land. And that's the Republican Party.
So in my mind, it is easy for your narrative to come together, right? Because clearly, as you're saying, the King of the North enters the glorious land. Elder Terry says July. you're saying this is the entrance of the King of the North, using the power that he had accumulated. We will say, as you have pointed out, from July to, I put it December. My reason for putting it in December, to December 31st, would be the war, the information war that took place, that America came out on December 31st saying that Russia had sought election interference. Those interferences were intercepted. So in my mind, there is your elephants at Argos that says, that made that alerted the people to Pyrrhus's intrusion then at Argos. The elephants did that. And so there was an information war there between July to December. Fine. I just wanted to understand,
Okay.
Same point that you're making, I guess, in my mind. It can sit with me once it is clear that, you're not dealing with the national Sunday law, but rather the Sunday law as it relates to the world, because this is the Exeter then for the Sunday law as it pertains to the world. That's the narrative that you're creating, right?
Thank you. Yes, I before we close, because I think we have a Q&A after this one. So, but let me finish this thought. Is that I want to emphasize also that this is not a battle, or battle is not the right word, but this is not this is not about dates. So yes, I'm suggesting Sunday laws 2025. Elder Terry says it's July 2024. This is not about picking the right date and then who is right about the right date. The date is connected to a story. It's about what story do you tell, and that depends on the events you choose, and it depends on the waymarks you mark. So it's not about, I'm not. We should not make it sound like this is only about, you take February and Elder Terry takes July. It's almost the same. Why not come together and fix it? Doesn't matter what date it is. No, it's not about the date. It's about the story. And so far, I've been my premise for my study, also back in January this year, is that when Elder Terry started talking about the Sunday law, it always ignored the Boston Concord Exeter. I know she says it's not true, and I think even in a presentation she did yesterday, she said that's not true because we've always been marking blah 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 blah, and she told blah 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 in the sense of Boston Concord Exeter. I don't think she has always done that. Yes, there has been the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Only after her study of the Sunday law, she came with Exeter is May 30. But there was never a story. There was never a threat. And only yesterday, in her presentation for I think it was the Canadian mainstream, she gave, for me at least, the first time where she connected those waymarks in a story. And that was for me the first time that she did it, and it made sense to me. It was okay story, and but I don't know. Elder Terry made it sound like if I have a very stupid question that was already answered months or years ago, and I thought that was a little unfair. But so connecting those dots, it has been my premise. So talking about a waymark, talking about a date is one thing, but we need to have a story to tell, and that depends on the waymarks and the events you choose. But I think it would be good to leave our discussion for the next present, and we have a short break. I don't know, Kathy?
Yes, that would be great. So if you would just close in prayer, we'll play a hymn, and is 15-minute break okay?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Is that good? Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's close with prayer. Dear Lord, we come before you on this Sabbath day to thank you for the blessings we receive by being part of this movement. Lord, it's not easy to follow the Lamb whithersoever it goeth, but we know it's the only way to go, and we know it's a way to better places. And I pray that you continue to be with us and follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth, also within the process where we are now as a movement, finding the truth, settling into the truth, both intellectually and spiritually. And I pray, Lord, that this hour that we've had may have contributed to that as well. We come back in 15 minutes and we'll have a short break. Help us to refresh ourselves and to be able to have a proper study and a blessed discussion thereafter. In Jesus' name, I thank you and I pray. Amen.